The AFL's copping a belt. Mick Malthouse, not least of which going after the AFL for staying quiet over the Joe Watson affair. Do you agree with him? Should the AFL have been more public this week?
I think Mick was being a bit harsh, to be honest. I don't agree with everything the AFL does, but I think they're in a difficult position at the moment, because if they provide a running commentary week in, week out on this investigation, that makes it pretty difficult, because they're running a joint investigation with ASADA, and they've got to come to an outcome, and then they've got to actually make decisions on that. So, I think if they were making a running commentary week in, week out, then it would be viewed by some as preempting what would be the outcome.
Well, you mentioned running commentary, but and I know you're not here to defend the AFL, absolutely not, God forbid, but as you talk about running commentary, that's never stopped them in the past. Andrew Demetriou has never worried about that type of thing. One of the great things about Andrew Demetriou is his passion and the fact that he can speak his own mind and tell people what he's thinking, and then rolls with the punches when people don't necessarily agree with him. It's one of the great things about his leadership. Maybe not so much this week.
Well, look, that'll be for others to say, but I think that the way in which the AFL have been on the front foot, back in January, and when these issues first raised their head, when the ACC released their report, the AFL, I think, has been on the front foot. Haven't sought to back away from this, haven't sought to underplay, haven't sought to say this has been a political agenda. I think the AFL have been very serious about saying, we've got to look at these issues, we've got to get independent people to investigate them, and then we'll take the results as they are and make decisions as they come.
But if you look at this, how big the AFL is, you have the champion player for the year, an absolute shining star, make the admission he did on Monday night, and then he plays on Thursday night. Can you imagine another sport where a champion would stand up and make an admission like that? The commission has nothing to say about it, and yet he still plays on Thursday night.
Well, I think it's perfectly reasonable that Job would play football last night and would continue to play, because this is an investigation which is concerning events that happened nearly 18 months ago. And the players are fully cooperating.
What does that matter?
Well, the players are fully cooperating with the investigation. This is not a situation where you've got a player who's recorded a positive test to a drug and then needs to be put out so that they're not competing against other athletes week in, week out with the benefit of some performance-enhancing effect.
Matt, with respect, what does it matter if it was 18 months ago or 5 minutes ago?
Because what we saw on Monday night...
2 years, look at Lance Armstrong. Lance Armstrong has been stripped of everything he's ever had.
Well, I think...
I'm not saying Joe Watson is Lance Armstrong, but I'm not making...
I'm glad you said that, Justin, because I think that to compare AFL to some other sports around the world, which have got quite questionable histories when it comes to anti-doping and performance-enhancing drug use, here in AFL, the first suggestion or instance that there's been some untoward practice going on, there's been a very serious investigation launched. And the complexities of that are that it's taken 5 months. I think we'd all prefer that was over by now. But what we saw on Monday night was just 5 minutes of Job's insights. And he was obviously very candid and very honest. And I think everybody's been...
Matt, how long would he need to speak for before it becomes important? If he only talked for 5 minutes, how long would you need his response to be before it was taken seriously?
No, I think everyone's taken it very seriously.
Half an hour? An hour?
But we also know that Job's given a 2.5-hour interview with ASADA, and as have many other people. And that's the investigation, which will come to its conclusion very soon, and that'll be when the appropriate time is to make judgments around what should be the response.
Look, I don't disagree with you. The investigation is important, but what's also important is the fact that he made that admission. You just can't take it back. And as you said yourself, you've seen the fallout here. You know what people have been talking about this week. It can't be taken back.
No, I don't think Job's sought to do that and I don't think he should be, criticised or hung out there by virtue of what he said.
Have you been in contact with him?
Look, I haven't spoken with Job personally this week, but our organisation has had a number of conversations with him. He's obviously had a game earlier in the week, and we've let him focus his preparation on that.
Okay, but what sort of, can you give us an idea of the level of support that you provide him in a situation like this?
Oh, look, we've been working with all the Essendon players, not just Job, over a number of months now, and that involves representing them in their interviews with ASADA, but also then keeping them up to date with information that we get as part of the investigation, and then also ensuring they've got people that they can talk to about the stress, the anxiety, which they're obviously under right now.
Have you talked to him about those very things, stress and anxiety,
Yeah, absolutely.
over this?
No, absolutely we have, because I think that we've seen this week, but even before this week, these players are under enormous amount of pressure. And this is pressure that is not brought about by their own doing. They've been placed in an untenable position where they go into a football club. They're employees. They're required to comply with and follow the directions of their club. This is not some athlete who hires his own entourage of coaches and sports scientists who are there to help him to achieve an Olympic gold medal. These are employees who go
No,
into
he
an
gets
environment.
paid more.
Well, they go into an environment where they're told from day one, follow the directions of your doctor. Only take what's approved by the club.
That's a defence I might point out that doesn't fly with WADA, and a defence that also doesn't fly with the AFL Code of Conduct.
The WADA Code actually does provide that athletes who can demonstrate no fault or negligence as part of what they did won't be suffering suspensions as a result of being found to have committed an anti-doping rule violation.
If you really believe in what you're saying right now, then we've got to overhaul the whole thing. Because if a player goes in there and is able to say that the club will do whatever they need to do, and I'll trust them because they're the club, if that's really what you believe, don't you think it's time to overhaul the entire way that we look at kids going into football?
Oh, look, Justin, we don't deny that the players have got some responsibility in this, but in this particular instance, what we do know, and what we heard from Job on Monday night, is he takes a clear conscience because of the steps that were taken. These weren't just players who were blindly following directions. These were players who asked proper questions, received answers, and then acted on that advice. You've got to remember that if players here had have sought advice from websites run by WADA or ASADA, had they consulted the ACC, they might have been told that AOD wasn't banned because that organisation published a report this year to that effect.
Yeah,
so
but Brian Taylor talked to me about that half an hour ago. ACC, the Australian Crime Commission, is not the overarching body on this. The WADA is, ASADA is, and the AFL is, not the ACC.
No,
but with respect, Brian Taylor brought that out before, and that's his right to do so, and you're pulling it out again. Why don't you pull out the statement that WADA also made, that said that it wasn't fit for human consumption? Well, not fit, it hadn't been passed for human consumption and therefore banned. Why don't we pull that one out?
Oh, I don't think we should ever lose sight of that statement which they released in response to the confusion that had been created. And that's one of the really, I think, poor things this whole debate, is that players here have been potentially administered substances which weren't approved for human use. So we can get all caught up on the situation around ASADA codes and penalties, but let's not forget for one moment here.
With respect, just before you move on from that, you brought up the Australian Crime Commission, that, and the report and that, and now you're telling me we're getting caught up in words that are being used by reports and commissions and.
Look, I think what I'd say, Justin,
you brought it up as a defence.
I think what I'd say, Justin, is that clearly there's been a lot of confusion around the status of one particular substance amongst the various regulatory bodies. And I think in that context, it's not unreasonable to expect that a young footballer would act upon the advice of those who are paid in positions of authority and responsibility in his club.